Alright, hello guys, welcome. Here we go. We're going to get started with another video lesson. Something to note about this lesson is there are not a lot of notes. It is a short notes day because we're doing another in-class assignment. The in-class assignment is geared towards helping us cement the lesson we're going to learn today and try to call back towards some of the period 1 stuff, because on Friday the 28th, you're going to have a period 1 checkpoint quiz on College Board on AP Classroom. So we'll talk about that in class more, but if you weren't in class and you're watching this video, on Friday, try to be in on time and in the class because we're going to run it live. Here it is timed. You all will have a certain amount of time to access it, and then it goes away. It is a full quiz grade as is, no curves, no adding, no, oh, well, it's an exit ticket, let me add some points, no practice. It is just straight up quiz grade. The grade is what you get. So make sure you fill it in, do it correctly, and are on time, and it is timed. So that'll be something for then. For right now, we are going to move on with the lesson. Mercantilism and Trade is the title. The do now is really simple. If you're not registered for AP Classroom, register. Here's the code, here's the link. It is just College Board, AP Classroom, normal stuff. So, the objective today is we are going to explain the systems of mercantilism and triangle trade and make connections to major milestones in U.S. history. We're going to talk about what these things will lead to. Key terms here: how will mercantilism lead to the grievances of the British colonists? That is our big brain question of the day. So we're going to go ahead and move forward. If you need time for the objective, pause it now, because now we're going to move on. So First, why do countries start colonies? We'll write this down. Most countries create colonies to increase their wealth. Most countries create colonies to increase their wealth. Now you're probably thinking, well, how do they do that? Well, that brings us to right here. If you look at this image and analyze it, right, what do you see in this image? Well, you see a woman, looks like a queen, royalty woman. That is the mother country sitting at the table. And then you see the 3 servants serving her. The 3 servants are all what? Well, they're all colonies, obviously, right? So you've got the mother country sitting right here. You've got the 3 colonies. Now look what they're holding. Gold and silver, foodstuffs, raw materials. So gold, silver, food, raw materials. Notice how they're like arching. They're in a tier. So obviously gold and silver is at the top. The most important of them is gold and silver. The reason that is because back then people do not use paper money. Gold and silver is the source of income. It's how you make more coins, which is how things were bought back then. Paper money's not a thing yet. So that is a big one. Paper money's not a thing. Gold and silver literally to make coins and to literally make more money. Foodstuffs. Food is just like food items, whether it be certain like plants, crops, fruits, vegetables, things that were in the New World that people liked. Certain livestock animals, turkeys, things like that. That was important to them as well. And raw goods that are used to make processed goods. These are really important as well. Raw material, lumber, fish, iron, things like that. So just keep that in mind as we move forward and talk more about mercantilism. So, mercantilism was a trade system that benefited the mother country at the expense of the colonies. There's not a lot of notes, but you do basically need to write this down, right? Instead of putting the key points up, I just put mercantilism. So it's instead of key point 1, just mercantilism. Under mercantilism, countries exported more than they imported by using colonies to send raw materials and buy finished goods. So the colonies are sending the raw materials, they're sending the ingredients, and then England is selling them back those ingredients in the form of a finished good. So it's colony-grown lumber, turned into a table, and then the table is sent back to the colonies to be sold. So the colonists are being used by the royals and by not so much the royals, but as much as the mother country. So keep that in mind. This is the mother country exploiting and using the colonies. Now we're going to move on to the next one. If you need time to write this, pause right now. So, mercantilism. Again, the New World, right, the colonies, does not have industry. The Old World, Europe, does not have raw materials. They don't have any access to them. So, raw materials are sent across the pond to the mother country. And once the mother country gets them, they have the industry to turn those raw materials into finished products that are then sent back to the colonies and sold. It's not like, here, you sent us some iron, so here are the tools we made for you. No. It is then sold back to the colonists, and the mother country just profits immensely. They just make crazy, mad profits because they're making money off something that they didn't even have to go find. It's something that they're making money off of the colonists' work, essentially. So the mother country is making all the profit, and the colonies are literally just losing money and not getting anything out of it. This is a pretty unfair system, and it's going to be made worse by a few laws that we're going to talk about next. So just keep that in mind. This system is unfair, and it is based around the colonies purely being the only ones who benefit. So, that brings us to the Navigation Acts. All right, the Navigation Acts are a series of laws, strict laws, that restricted the use of foreign shipping for trade between England and the colonies, meaning that the colonies could not sell to any other country that wasn't England. They couldn't sell to the French, and they couldn't sell to Spain. The French and the Spain are mortal enemies of England, so how dare you colonies sell to them? It couldn't happen. Why did this happen? Well, because England wanted to force the colonies to trade only with them. Right? They're their colonies. England should be getting all the benefits of them. The effect, well, it irritates the colonists. Once the Navigation Acts are enforced after the French and Indian War, the colonists are going to resent these acts and resent the British for putting them in place, and it's going to be bad news for the British for having them there. Now, if you need time on the slide, which you probably do, go ahead and pause here because we're going to move forward, and we're going to move on to the next slide, which is talking about the Navigation Acts. So, here's what happens, essentially. The British tried to demand that colonial ships go through Great Britain before they can go to their destination. All right? This was a way to charge and tax the colonies. They wanted to put a duty on the ships. Now, smugglers are the great way to counter that. There's a lot of smugglers in the United States, and they'll make a lot of money, or in the 13 colonies, They'll make a lot of money doing this. John Hancock is going to fund the early years of the Revolution almost by himself because of how much money he made as a smuggler. He's one of the biggest smugglers in the entire city of Boston. Now, between 1650 and 1763, there will be a policy of salutary neglect. Now, look right here, right? Or you can't see me, but if you could see me, I'd have my hands up in the air. Hands off. Salutary neglect is hands off. The British are not going to enforce these acts. They're going to have their hands off. They're not going to enforce them. They're just going to kind of let things happen. But after the French and Indian War, bankrupt England starts to enforce these laws and taxes. And it is a major cause and lead up to the American Revolution. Because once these things start getting enforced, everybody starts losing money in the colonies. So keep that in mind, and if you need time, pause on here as we move forward. So, triangle trade. We've talked about this already a little bit, and this is our last real slide, and all I'm going to do is tell you and some things to write down while we're here. When you think Columbian exchange, which we've talked about, which was two back and forth, right? Back and forth between the New World and North America and Europe, back and forth, right? Columbian exchange. Columbian exchange is really something that only happens in the 1500s. So once we go past that, you start in the 16, 1700s, you start to add in the African slave trade, right? Slaves from Africa coming in through here and then up into North America. So this is triangle trade. This is what happens after the 1500s. So that's the big difference. Columbian exchange, keep it in the 1500s. Once we move on into the 1600s, it's all triangle trade. And I want you to notice that slavery, a lot of the slaves, like we said the other day, are going into the West Indies. This is where they are going to be, most of them, very small amounts, not that it's any better, it's still pretty horrible, are going into North America. And the reason I point that out is because something to consider, and we're going to talk about it more when we get there, up until 1793, it's not exactly profitable for slave owners to own slaves in North America. Like, they do it because the rest of the world does it, and it's a horrible act, and they shouldn't be doing it to begin with, but they are because everybody else is. But in 1793, there's going to be an invention, and that invention is the cotton gin. And when the cotton gin is invented, slavery is never going to go away, and it is going to be invested in more and more. Eventually, about 20 years after the Constitution is made, the African slave trade, as it's known, will end, and it'll just be slavery within the U.S. That doesn't make it much better. It's, if anything, it's worse, because pretty much the U.S. is the last country to still be doing this horrible stuff. But know that this stain on American history and on American people of this time is something that looked for a little while like it wasn't going to be around until the cotton gin comes around. So just keep that in mind. It wasn't quite dying out, but it wasn't doing well until the cotton gin. And then the cotton gin made it profitable, and we could kiss all that goodbye, because once it was profitable, you know, these people weren't going to get rid of it. So something to consider as we move on to the exit ticket. So the exit ticket is in Google Classroom. Hippo the documents, answer the questions. It is not under exit tickets, though. It is under assignments, because it is going to be a period 1 and period 2 SAQ sort of. So keep that in mind. You're going to have the last bit of class. If you were live in class, we'd have like the last 15 minutes to do it. Since we are not live in class, you're watching the video later, go into Google Classroom and submit that assignment. Alright guys, that is it for me. If you have any questions, you know where to find me on Teams or on email. Have a great rest of your day, y'all. I'll see you in class.